Welcome back to my channel Tutelage, a guide to learner. Here, this is Sriparna. Hope all of you are doing good. In my last session, we had discussed the level of teaching. Most importantly, the understanding level of teaching and reflective level of teaching and its model also. But now we are going to explain some new concepts under the same chapter, and that's why it is named as Teaching Aptitude Part 3. So let's start the session and move on the next. So here there are some topics which we will explain today. So first one is characteristics of teaching. The second one is principles of teaching. Third one is learners characteristics, and last but not the least, the most important concept of teaching aptitude, that is the Bloom's taxonomy. Okay, so let's start the session and move on the main slide. So now let's see some characteristics of teaching. So first one is that teaching is an art and science. Okay, so at first we have to discuss why we call teaching is a science, because it is a systematic and logically planned activity. Systematic and logically. Clear? So what is the main aim of the teaching? So the main aim of teaching is to shape the behavior of the students in a desired manner, and it involves the scientific strategies, practices, techniques to enhance the learning process. Teachers experiment with their different strategies to test their effectiveness among themselves and among students also. So teachers also maintain a record of score of students in tests to keep track of their performance. So that's why we called as teaching is a science, because it is a systematic and logically planned activity. Okay, so now going to the another keywords, that is art. So why we call teaching is an art also? So teaching is basically based on the creativity of the teacher. Creativity of the teacher. Okay, so teachers are using different methods, teaching aids for enhancing the learning process. So what suits one students and may not suit others, so teachers have to adjust their strategies, practices, techniques to the requirements, levels and the personality of the students. So there is flexibility in teaching. So teaching also depends upon the aptitude, ability, personality, knowledge, most importantly knowledge of the teacher. So that's why teaching is an art, because in just one sentence, teaching is based on the creativity of the teacher, and it depends upon the aptitude, ability, personality, knowledge of the teacher also. Now going to the second point, teaching is dynamic and continuous. Okay, so why we call teaching is dynamic? Because the teacher's activities are influenced by various qualities and the incidents and the change accordingly, because yeah, they are using different type of scientific strategies, practices, techniques for enhancing the learning procedure. So that's why and they are not executed in strict routines and regimes. So that's why teaching is dynamic and flexible, and we have already told that portion elaborately. So now going to the second keyword, that is teaching is continuous. Okay, so teaching can be seen as a lifelong process. Okay, 1 minute. So lifelong process. So it is not completed in just one step, rather it is a continuous process. Now going to the third point, teaching is interactive and complex activity. So interactive. Interactive means it is a two-way interaction between the teacher and the learners. So there is a flow of knowledge. There is a flow of knowledge, okay, from both sides. The teachers as well as students learn in this communication process. Earlier teaching practices were more teacher centric, but now the focus has shifted to learners. Students are now encouraged to ask questions and take part enthusiastically in a classroom activities, and teaching should be a dialogue instead of being a monologue. So that's why teaching is an interactive process. And now going to the second keyword, that is complex activity. So we have already told teaching is a science and art as well as a craft also. So due to these multiple aspects of the nature of the teaching, it's a complex activity for which diverse sets of skills, abilities are required. A teacher has to deal with students of different personalities at the same time. So while planning the teaching activity, a lot of factors have to be considered, like students prior knowledge, pace of learning, interest, etc. So that's why it is a complex activity also. So now going to the fourth point, that is teaching is a moral activity, okay. So the purpose of the teaching is basically the all round development of the students. So moral activity means all round development. So the main purpose of the education is all round development of the students, okay. So teachers should not just focus on the prescribed syllabus while ignoring the moral development of the students, because students are the citizens of the tomorrow. So classroom plays an important role in shaping them into citizens with good moral character. So moral and ethical aspects should be integrated in the curriculum. So teaching is a moral activity also. And now going to the fifth point, teaching can be formal or informal, okay. So teaching, obviously teaching can be formal, because as an interaction between the teacher and student in a classroom setup, which is known as the formal teaching. And on the other hand, teaching can also take place outside of the classroom, which is informal teaching, and that is the differences between the formal and the informal teaching. So here we can see a basic requirement of teaching. So at first we have to discuss the independent variable, because there are three variable: independent variable, dependent variable and the intervening variable. So what do you mean by a independent variable? So independent variable basically influences the dependent variable, okay. So without independent variable, the process is incomplete. So in the teaching process, teacher act as an independent variable, because teacher influences uh, their students, and they are using different kinds of strategies, practices, teaching methods for enhancing the learning process or the teaching process. So I think this is clear why we call teacher is an independent variable. And now going to the second variable, that is a dependent variable. So student is basically a dependent variable in the teaching learning process, because dependent variable is what happens as a result of the independent variable. So value of the dependent variable depends on the changes in the independent variable, like students performance, like students results, depends on the what kind of strategies, what kind of methods, teaching aids uses by the teacher. I think this is clear why we call the student is a dependent variable. So independent variable and the dependent variable both are related to each other. And we have already told that portion. Teaching is an interactive process between the teacher and the student, so between the independent variable and the dependent variable. So without any variable, the process is incomplete. And now going to the third variable, that is the intervening variable. So what do you mean by a intervening variable? So intervening variable basically affects the relationship between the independent variable and the dependent variable, and it plays a major role for the relationship between the independent variable and the dependent variable, or the teacher and students. So different kinds of teaching methods, teaching aids, learning materials, knowledge of the teacher, knowledge of the nature of the students, and all things are required for the effective teaching. So I think this is clear what are the basic requirement of teaching learning process. And now move on the next slide. So here we can see some principles of the teaching. So the first one is principle of activity. Okay. So the teacher should involve the students in learning process through some activity, obviously, and it will help in better retention, and they will not forget what they have learned. So if the teacher is not able to engage their students, then they will not focus on what is being taught. So learning takes place when students are involved in it. So that's why, and without activity this is impossible. So that's why teaching is an activity. Okay. So this is called as principle of activity, and which is one of the most important principle of teaching. Now going to the second point, that is the principle of linking with people or linking with life. All theoretical knowledge should be integrated with the example from the real life. By these students uh, will learn at a faster pace, and they will be able to retain the new information which they have gained. So that's why it is one of the most important principle of teaching learning process again. So now we are going to the third point, that is a principle of definite aim. So what is the aim of the teaching? So the main aim of the teaching, that is the shape the behavior of the students. Okay. And the teaching aim is must be predetermined and clearly defined, so that the teaching activities can be planned accordingly, along with the selection of the teaching methods and teaching aids. So the aim and objective of the course lesson should also be communicated to students at the beginning of the class, and this will help in developing curiosity in them. And now going to the fourth point, that is the principle of motivation. Okay. So every student possesses some unique skill, and these need to be appreciated. So if a student is not much good in studies, he might be good in some other activities, like he or she might be good in singing, drawing, and etc. So the teacher should always encourage the skills of the students and motivate them to pursue a career of their choice, and encourage them to sharpen their skills for a better future. Students should be motivated for participating actively in learning for a better result. Rewards, gifts, praise, etc. can be used for motivating students. And most importantly, stories of great personalities like Rabindranath Tagore, Swami Vivekananda, and their experiences, Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, their experiences can also arouse motivation in students. And now we are going to the fifth point, that is the principle of the individual differences. Okay. So no two students have the same ability, skill, and the personality, and we have already told there is individual differences. So the teacher should be able to recognize the individual differences in students and address their specific needs for effective teaching. Sorry. So though the students have the same have the individual differences, so that's why teaching should be planned in such a way that all students have equal opportunities and no one is left behind. And that's why principle of the individual differences is one of the most important principle, because in the teaching learning process, uh, individual differences is present. Now, going to the sixth point, that is the principle of the creativity and reinforcement. So, we have already told teaching is an art. So, and it basically based on the creativity of the teacher, and that's why creativity is one of the most important principle of teaching. So, the teacher should encourage creativity and the critical thinking in students, and teaching methods, teaching aids should be selected in such a way that they help in enhancing the students' creativity and the critical thinking. And now going to the reinforcement part, so teacher can reinforce students verbally by praising them or by giving gifts and rewards for good and the responsible behavior, correct answer, or the good grades, obviously, etc. So, these will encourage them to continue their hard work and practice good habits. And now we are going to the next point, that is the principle of the training of senses. So sensory organ, we have five sensory organ. So sensory organs play an important role in learning. Different activities, methods, aids involve the use of different sensory organs such as the eyes and the ears. And now going to the last point, that is the principle of the selection and planning. Okay. Material, teaching material should be selected in such a way that it helps in fulfillment of the aims of teaching. So the content should be updated from time to time with respect to the updates in the field. So it should also be adjusted according to the needs of the students, and there is individual differences. Keep it in mind always. And now going to the planning portion, so teaching activities, methods, aids should be planned in such a way that help in the optimum use of resources for the fulfillment of predetermined goals of teaching within the time limit. So without planning, it is difficult to complete the syllabus within the specified time. So course plan, lesson plan, text schedules, assignments, etc. should be should must be planned. Okay. So I think all principles of teaching are clear to everyone. So now we are going to the next slide. So here we can see the next topic, that is how to teach the students. So teachers should always approach from the simple to complex, because students understand the simple things easily. So a teacher should approach always from simple to complex content, explain simple concepts first and then the complex part of the topic. And now we are going to the next point, that is known to unknown. So it is easy for students to build new knowledge if they are able to relate it to what they already know. So the teaching should follow from known to unknown. Past experiences of the students should be linked to new teaching. Now going to the third point, that is seen to unseen. Similarly, the teacher can plan the lesson to flow from the seen to unseen. Such an approach can be used for better understanding of the students. Okay, because students understand the simple things, known things easily. Okay, so now going to the fourth point, that is concrete to abstract. The teacher should explain the established facts first and then move on to the abstract thing. So teaching process should proceed from the concrete to abstract facts. Now going to the fifth point, that is a particular to general. Specific facts should be discussed first and then these should be used to generalize. By following the approach from the particular to general, such an approach is inductive in nature also. And now we are going to the sixth point, that is the psychological to logical. So while planning the lecture, the teacher should keep in mind the psychological needs of the students first and then go into the logical arrangement of the concepts. By addressing the psychological needs first, the teacher will be able to engage the students. So the lesson planning should be from psychological to logical. And then go to the seventh point, that is the analysis to synthesis. So the teacher should first teach analysis and then synthesis. According to the definition, according to the dictionary definition, analysis means the process of the separating something into its constituent elements. That means the main thing and the different types of components, and this is known as the analysis. Clear? And now going to the synthesis part. Okay. So synthesis means the combination of the components or elements to form a connected whole. So all components combined to form a whole thing. So that is the process, that is a synthesis process. Okay. So, for better understanding and the clarity, a problem should be divided into parts for analysis and then the parts can be combined to solve the whole problem by synthesizing. So, that's why teaching uh, should be from analysis to synthesis. And now going to the last point, that is the empirical knowledge to rational knowledge. So empirical knowledge, what do you mean by a empirical knowledge? Empirical knowledge is based on the experience, okay, and the rational knowledge is based on the logic. So that is the basic differences between the empirical knowledge and the rational knowledge. So teaching can start with empirical knowledge with experience and proceed to the rational knowledge, proceed to the logical portion of the subject or concept. Okay, so empirical knowledge is specific and rational knowledge is general. That's why teaching should be from empirical knowledge to rational knowledge, and the teacher should always encourage self study among the students. I think the teaching process is clear to everyone. So now we are going to the next slide. So here we can see some characteristics of learner. So on the basis of the nature, characteristics of the learner can be categorized as the personal, academic, social or emotional, and the cognitive portion. Okay. So what do you mean by a personal characteristics? So personal characteristics include the demographic information of the learner like age, gender, maturity level, etc. Language. Okay. And now going to the second one, that is the academic activities. Obviously academic activities includes all academic information of the learner. So educational, what is the educational level of the students, their learning goals, etc., are the examples of the academic characteristics of learner. And now we are going to the third point, that is the social or emotional characteristics. It is basically based on the relation of a group or of an individual with the group. So group structure, social place, uh, the place of the individual within a group, self image, mood are the example of the are the social or emotional characteristics of the learner. And now we are going to the last characteristics, that is the cognitive portion. So it determines how the learner perceives, remembers, thinks, solves the problem, or organizes, represents information in her or his brain. So, attention span, memory level, intellectual skills, all are the characteristics of cognitive characteristics. So, I think this is clear. What are the learner's characteristics, personal, academic, social, emotional, or the cognitive one. Okay, I think this is clear to everyone. The last topic is Bloom's taxonomy, but Bloom's taxonomy is a vast topic. If I continue it in this session, then the session will be too lengthy. So that's why we are done for the today's session. I hope this session will be very useful to everyone. So if you like my session, then like and share and comment. So please do some support and subscribe to my channel for getting more useful session. I will come again with a new session. Till then, stay tuned. Thank you to all of you. Happy learning.